What is up, guys? This is lecture 2 of my series. We're going to go over some competitive principles. These are relatively basic, but I'll probably explain them in a bit more in depth than what you may or may not know. So let's get right into this episode. Alright, so this is going to be a long episode because getting all these in one go is really handy. So we're going to have priority, we're going to have the rotation types, the types of positioning a team will do, splits, and scouting fundamentals. Now, rotating, types of positioning, splits, and priority are all very, very interlinked, so keep an eye out. Try and apply some principles I'm talking about to games that you remember watching, because you'll notice that everything I'm talking about will link with each other, so priority and rotation types will link. Basically, everything from 1 to 4. It basically is the foundation of competitive PUBG, and these things all are intertwined with priority, which is the most important thing, which we'll get right into. Alright guys, we're going to talk about priority now. Priority is probably the most foundational aspect of competitive PUBG. Everything ties back to priority, and a lot of strategy revolves around priority, and teams will do things based on this. So first of all, what is it? Well, I've defined it as the position within a circle that a team has access to as a result of their loot spot and rotation timers. So basically, kind of what I said, but priority is simply where we've landed and what position we can get in the first circle based off where we've landed. Now, every team might have a different idea of what is good or not in a circle, so this is on average, I would say, of what is objectively the right thing to do. This doesn't really matter in pubs, this is more of like a competitive PUBG thing. Now, in order to alter your priority, which is very, very hard to do, because you need to think about it, if you're further away, it takes longer to get to a position. But yeah, so that's basically what timing is, like leaving your loot spot early. The reason you do that is to make sure you get your priority, or get priority that you might not normally get. So priority can only really be changed if a team leaves their loot spot quicker or later. Both of them affect their priority, so that's important to think about. Alright, so I am going to give you guys an example of this because everyone was asking to make sure I give examples. So this is just a random EU scrim set. So when I talk about priority, we need to think about what teams can get to center zone and what teams can't, because at the end of the day, being in the middle of the zone is on average the best. Yes, I know there's edge teams. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, so a team who loots this position, they're going to go further in. What will that allow them? What will that allow Palace to do? Palace will then be able to come in behind them. Terminal can also do the same thing if they choose. Yongchon has pretty much first access, except they had a few alt droppers, or this is a kind of a main drop in some regions. But they will try and either go here, or they'll stay in Yongchon, because it's basically middle of the zone. It's good for a lot of spaces. But as we can see, a lot of teams will and should flock to the middle. And what does that mean? Is that the middle is going to be quite stacked, because these are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams that have priority into the center of the zone. What does that leave the rest of the teams? Well, the rest of the teams will then have the option to wrap or not, decide, but it doesn't matter. No matter how quick Young leaves, they are never going to beat all these teams who are in a closer distance to the center of the zone. So that is the first thing we need to think about. The second thing that we need to think about is how each zone affects priority, and how some zones tend to be more edge heavy and some zones tend to be more center heavy. Well, for this zone, it's going to be very, very edge heavy, or at least it should be. And the reason I say that is because this central area of the Takeo map is a hill, and there's too much tree foliage. It's basically an unscoutable area. And what is this? This is a little field. This is also a little field. So when we look at the zone as an entirety, we can see that a good chunk of the center of the largest land mass, because this is like a 70-30 or 60-40, depending on how optimistic you are, you'd assume that it's going to end up here. So what does that leave us? Well, that leaves us only really the edge of the map, which is free. So I want to just test my theory. I haven't looked at this game, I swear. But when we look at when we look at the edge, pretty much every team that didn't have priority is on the edge. So a lot of these teams who have priority are going to stack center, and a lot of these teams who don't are probably going to stack edge, and that's where you start getting the differing playstyles, which we will talk about quite soon. That's devious. Alright, so now we'll talk about the type of playstyles for a team. This is pretty self-explanatory, but we'll go into more of like the values and like the trade-offs you might have to give for each of these types of playstyles. But yeah, let's get into some examples. These examples will be different every time and from different regions, and some will be scrims, some will be comps, but we'll try and keep it interesting to see a large range of plays from different regions. Alright, so we'll start with a center playstyle. Now, center playstyles are usually very popular amongst central located teams. So teams like Lumber, Naros, Train Station, a lot of these teams like being in the middle because they have the highest percent chance that they will be in the next phase. Pretty sure that's mathematically accurate, and I'm pretty sure that's how PUBG circles work in general. Some would argue that if you feel like if you're in C1, you're just going to be edge next circle. But regardless of that, theoretically, if you're in the middle of C1 or near the middle, you should have a higher percent chance of getting the zone compared to the teams on the outside. So that is the benefit. The issue with being a center of C1 is that sometimes it kind of bottlenecks you in where you can rotate. And the reason for that is there is going to be less teams on the edge and more teams on in the center, as you'd expect in a game like this. But what does that mean is if you're a central team, you're going to have more teams close to you, which makes rotating and leaving positions harder because you have less room to backfill compounds. Oh my god, we haven't told what backfill is. Quickly, because maybe we won't have to put it in another episode, backfilling is when a team leaves a compound and you fill them in from the back. That's what it means. One more benefit of being a center team is that you need to make less decisions. At the end of the day, the more decisions you make in PUBG, the higher chance you're going to make a mistake. So being in a center team basically guarantees you should be at least on edge of C2. So teams on average will have to make less decisions the closer they are to the middle of the zone, because it's safe and it will allow the zone to sweep enemies away, and teams will naturally die as the zone gets smaller. But anyway, so yeah, one of the advantages that maybe not many people talk about is that you don't have to make as many decisions as when you're a center team. So I find that very interesting, and maybe it's topical, but I think edge teams usually have better macro than center teams. But sometimes center teams are just too fucking good at being consistent. So that's an argument for another day. Alright, so we're going to talk about edge teams now. This is a Chinese pro scrim for everyone's information. So edge teams usually like to come in quite slow and gather as much information into off central positions and just the area around them. So these teams who have less priority than the central teams, they have to make a lot more decisions and gather a lot more info because they are likely going to be out of the next zone. So a lot of these edge teams are set up in high ground spots. They're trying to control as much space. You'll notice that a lot of teams on edge are doing wider splits, which is, we'll talk about that in the next slide. But anyway, these edge teams are going to just chill, and they are waiting for the circle to pop. Now, this is where we'll get into the benefit of being an edge team. Alright, so some of the benefits of an edge team is that they have less people around them. Edge teams can usually gather a lot more space and control of a zone in preparation for the second circle. So these teams can, if they want, get access to huge chunks of the zone in a percentage form. So like a team over here might only have 3% of the zone, but these guys might have a little bit more. But anyway, so that is an advantage because you have less pressure, and pressure is when people shoot you. The only really exception is sitting in a compound, but on average, the more people you have, that can shoot you probably will try to. So staying on the edge keeps you away from danger, and it lets you make assumptions and gather information safely. So everything else always has a tiny bit of risk, but when you're around less people, you have a less chance of just getting shot at in general. So you're going to have a better chance of surviving. Oh. Alright, so one more benefit we'll talk about is that edge teams also get access to the other edge team's old edge, which can sometimes be decent chunks of the zone. This game is an example. It's a decent chunk of Circle 2. You could say it's like 30% of Circle 2 is completely free because it's on the new edge. But these teams had access to their old edge, but they also have access to edges of other circles. If we look at all these pink lines, this is what it looks like. So that gives us an advantage, right? Because we've had to sacrifice no risk. We have absolutely no risk being edge, but we've managed to get a better percentage odds of being in the next zone than teams who were slightly more central. So that is one of the examples that I'm talking about. I think that was bad. Now, going to the final weakness I'll discuss is that the problem with being the edge of the next edge is that it's now just as unlikely, it's more likely once again for center to get fed than the edge. So the downside of being edge is that you basically are gambling twice, or at least close to that, because if you don't get the first shift and you don't get the second shift, it makes your game really, really difficult because you've kind of got yourself on the outside and let everyone go in front of you, and now you have to move and everyone is looking at you. So that's where the problems with edge come in, because once you slowly start to lose that space on the edge, you're going to get constricted by more pressure and more people looking at you. So this is a perfect example where all these teams in here, they need to get access to the south of this hill. And the only way they can do that is by eliminating everyone south, because this is the last position they can really play before they start to need to face teams and actually get into fights. And remember, we never want to get into fights early game, because losing people early is a huge detriment to our team and our late game team fighting ability. So we'll go over that later because that's an interesting topic too. So yeah, that's for later. Alright, now that we know what priority is, we can talk about when to rotate central and when to rotate edge. So we have two types of rotates. We have straight on and we have wrapping. We do wrapping when we want to get access to an edge that is more likely to be clear. And that is because, remember, everyone is going to go to the center. Oh, wait, I don't know if I've talked about that yet. It might be next slide. But anyway. Alright, now that we have talked about what priority is, we can get a better understanding of when we need to go straight onto the zone and when we need to wrap. So, to begin with, we are probably going to go straight into the zone when we have priority. When we have access to central compounds that give us bigger chunks of estate and land and space, we are going to go there quicker, right? And we are going to go there in a straight line, because the straight line is the fastest line in most circumstances. Anyway, these teams should rotate straight on to the middle, right? These players and teams should be going to the middle of zone as fast as possible. And they do that from going straight on. So that you'll notice that a lot of the teams who have priority will take they'll take a straight line directly to their loot spot. They might do some leapfrogging from compound to compound, but they're generally going pretty straight and they're trying to get inside the zone. So this is taking way too long. So let's just do it like that. So yeah, we'll watch this really quickly. you'll notice that everyone's going as pretty much direct as they can, with some exceptions on the south. People are taking the fastest route they possibly can. So yeah, that is what straight on or direct is. Alright, so now a good example for a wrapping playstyle and when to wrap is when we can guess where other teams are gonna go. And what I mean by that is when we look at this plane path, we can see it's very south, so we know that a lot of these cities are kind of gonna be off limits. So a perfect example is the airport team here, right? Their fastest line this way is going to lead them to being on this type of edge, because this Kang Yuan team will beat them to this spot. But if they take a less direct route into the zone, they might get more circle control. So airport should or could or would go up here, and then they can probably keep going further. So we're getting in a little bit further because we know that the terminal team has good access and speed to the center of this circle, leaving their edge free as they were the outermost team. Alright, we're going to go over the types of splits and like when we kind of do them, when we'll kind of see them, and the benefits of them very, very quickly. Alright, so let's talk about 2-2s, right? So 2-2s are usually close together. They're usually very defendable. You can help your teammates, they can help you. They can group within 10 to 15 driving seconds, which is very quick. Think about a molly will consume about half the time of that, or around it, you know. And a smoke can also stall for 10 seconds, at least. So we want to make sure we're able to defend each other. If an edge team decides your priority spot, your priority in the zone, is worth the risk of a 4 versus 2, they might crash. It's a bad example because green's fighting, but this pink team might crash because they think the value of this compound is better. The central players need to go and help their teammates to avoid a 4v2, which has a much higher percentage chance of winning. So they need to back them up. Or the split needs to decide to come and group on the more central position. So that's what a lot of splits happen, and sometimes teams will do blind sends, assuming these splits exist, and knowing that a 4 versus 2 with sudden, like happening suddenly, is going to give the other side of the split less time to react. So that is why either side of the splits may get breached. But in saying that, 1-1-1-1s, which I guess kind of counts, 1-1-1-1s are an even worse example of this. And the worst part of 1-1-1-1s is they don't really have a home base. It's very chaotic to assign one spot the main protective spot when it only has one person at it, and it's usually quite far away. For like 3 people have to drive back to you, so it's a little hard to get all the resources back at the main priority. But in saying that, having a wide 1-1-1-1 gives you access to more information. And remember, information is so important in this game. I don't even think we've talked about how important it is, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory. But you get information to more of the zone than teams who are in smaller splits may. So it's an example, you just average, but like these guys can probably see a lot more of the zone just because of how spread they are across it. Alright, so the last split, and I honestly think this is the most successful type of split, is a 3-1. And the reason I love 3-1 so much, so much, is because you gain this safety of 3 players, which is 75% of your resources. So unless 4 players are shooting at you, you're going to have an equal fight. So these three players are able to move together in a formation, essentially, with relative safety because they have two other teammates who can shoot back, and if someone's not shooting at you, you can shoot at them. So it's the same thing for your team. So another thing, so the other benefit of 3-1s is it allows you to very easily bully and control space because you are able to show enough presence as 3, which could be interpreted as 4 when teams don't have perfect info. And teams very rarely have perfect info because sometimes you have to look at the same spot like the whole time, but that's the point, is that sometimes you can have an advantage over teams because they have less information than you. So you have a free man who can go out and gather space and get extra information to make sure they have info for decisions for the next zone. So yeah, that is why I love 3-1s. They're so good. If you're pubbing, you need a 3-1. Trust me, you'll get shit done and you'll never get backstabbed. If you don't want to get third-partied, 3-1s are essential because the one player can make these guys stop and think and decide if it is worth pushing a potential 4-man. Alright, so we're going to talk about scouting, which is another absolute foundation and fundamental of PUBG, and that is gathering information, which is we call scouting. Now, scouting is so important because the more information you have to make a decision, usually the better the decision will be and the higher % chance it'll be correct. So we always want to get information. And how do we do this? Well, when scouting locations and compounds, we have a little checklist. So the first action we need to do is we need to listen. We need to see if there's been any gunshots around. Can we recall if anyone shot in this direction 5-10 minutes ago? Because that is very important information. The less people that shoot, the more likely that there will probably be less people there. Anyway, action 2 is we need to look at the compound and see it with our 2 eyes in whatever scope we have. Hopefully it's a 4 or 6 or an 8. If it's less than that, I'm sorry, that kind of sucks. But what we are looking for is a checklist for efficient scouting, which we want to do it as soon as possible, because the sooner we get shit done, the sooner we can put people in that compound and get what we want. So we are looking for movement. We are looking at this compound and with our peripheral vision, seeing if anything looks out of the ordinary or is moving on the screen when we are looking at it, because everything should be still except for players and cars. We are then looking to see if we can see any parked cars around it. If there's a parked car, there's likely going to be a player there, because how the fuck did they get there, you know? They need a car. Next, we are looking to see if windows are broken. People are lazy. People jump out of windows when they loot. When they get in compounds, they break windows for fun. Some people don't like shooting through the glass. I think maybe it gives you a visual disadvantage. But if you see any glass broken, you should be very concerned because there might have been a player here. Maybe not now, but in the past there had to be someone to break that. And the final thing that is very similar to the windows, we're looking to see if any doors are open. If any doors are open, there could have been someone there. So let's take our time and look at this compound with a bit more intensity and with a bit more patience to double check that no one is there. Now, I'm really sorry I don't have examples for these, but I thought they were theoretically easy to explain, so I didn't think we needed an example for this. But anyway, a hard scout, and this is the highest chance that a location is clear, is a drive scout. So we're hopping in our car and we are driving at the compound in a way that is slightly around the edges so we don't just get shot out straight away, or at least make the shots slightly difficult for the enemy. Now, first action we're going to do for this is we're going to have one teammate watching, because these players are the players who need to look for movement. We're looking for movement in windows, cars moving, anything like that, doors opening, windows breaking. They are looking for you to check if there is players there. Now, the second part is driving, the actual driving. So just as I explained, we're drive scouting that compound. We're going to go around the outskirts to check for cars, because without cars, there's a very low chance that a team is in that compound in PUBG, because most teams, in order to get somewhere, they need a vehicle. It's a big map. So they're not going to run everywhere. So if there's a car, there's usually a higher % chance that there's someone in that compound. Now, once we've confirmed this, we can relay to the rest of our team that this compound is most likely clear. And if you're still kind of freaking out because you saw windows and doors broken, then we can clear buildings at a time and take our time and just make sure it's clear. But honestly, as long as you do a proper drive scout, no one shoots you, no one moves, and there's no cars there, I think most of the time, 99% of the time, you're going to find yourself in a free compound. Alright guys, I explained some of these concepts. I won't explain them fully because once we can start getting into more VOD review sessions where we actually go over games that you guys want and talk about all these principles and how they differ from game to game, because that's the most interesting part about PUBG. These principles will differ from game to game and they will produce entertaining content. Right, so we'll go over that in more detail. So if you tune in for future episodes and you listen to this one, you will hear words that I'm saying in this one which are PUBG specific, and you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. And that is the goal, because if you know what I'm talking about, you're going to apply it into your pub games and your ranked games and whatever competition you do, and you're going to feel good about yourself. Alright, enough yapping. We're going to finish this session with some homework. Now, last week's homework was pretty fucking boring, and it didn't really require anyone to send me anything, but if you actually want me to help you and want to improve at this game, you are more than welcome to send me a direct message on Twitter or respond in the YouTube comments, and I will assess your homework for you, free of charge. This is completely free. Just might take some time, so I'll get to you, but I have a week between each series, roughly. But yeah, so let's go over the homework. I want you guys to pick out 2 games from PGC 2023 and identify what you guys think are good splits and maybe what splits are not optimal. So we're going to have a few splits. Just, you don't have to pick that many, but just pick the splits you think are good and the splits you think are bad. And then, using some of the theory we may have learnt today, why are they good and how could they be better? So this is when you guys are going to have to put down the types of splits, the benefits, the type of positioning, our priority, and how we're rotating, right? So you have to put a few principles that we've learned today in order to get the right answer, at least, or how I want the answer to be seen and written. So yeah, that's what we're going to go over. The next one is when playing pubs. Now, you don't need to send this one to me, but when playing pubs, I want you guys to apply the scouting principles and just try and keep a mental track of how many times scouting properly led to you guys living in that compound, right? No one likes getting righted in compounds. No one likes dying out of cars. See how many times that you do this and take your time with scouting. See how many times that you live and see how many times you die to see if it has showed improvements. Now, as far as the last homework assignment, I want you to pick 2 games again from 2023 PGC and try and look at what team did not take priority, so they didn't go further into the middle of the zone. And what may have that done to the rest of the lobby in terms of creating stacked sides, maybe, or I won't give the answer away. And then I want you guys to ask yourself why they did that. So really think about why they have not gone into the dead center. What type of terrain might be there? What area of the map is it? Is it low ground? Is it high ground? So yeah, let's ask that. And please send me your homework on Twitter or YouTube comments. You don't have to, obviously. This is just for the people who really are interested in this and they want a mentor who will help them get better and try and help them improve at the game. So feel free to reach out to me. I may take some time, as I said earlier, but I will get to you guys. This has been really motivating for me to share this type of information because seeing people so passionate also makes me very happy. So yeah, thank you guys.